In this video, I want to address page layout features within Microsoft Word 2013. So rather than the home ribbon, we're going to go over to the page layout ribbon here. And we have a series of options that are available to us. And we'll start with page margins. Okay, so we're going to go over to this button here. The margins are the area of your page where you cannot type anything, right? So they stay blank. And your ruler here identifies your margins as the gray area. So this area, this area, this area, and down below as well. Okay, so those are the spots where you just can't type. So I'm just going to turn this off here. And you can see our ruler here, okay? So that's the area where you can't. Now, I know that it is possible to change your margins by clicking and dragging in here. However, it's a little reckless, for lack of a better term. Some people do it just to make it fit, but sometimes it may not actually fit your printer. So I prefer the old school method of changing margins where I have control. Now, these are predetermined template style settings that you can choose. But if you want to go to custom, you can come here. And here you can totally fully customize the size of your margins, okay? So you'll be able to change top, bottom, right, left to whatever you'd like. I don't know that you can go much less than 0.5. Otherwise, I think you're getting out of the printable area of your document. So be cautious of that. The other thing that you can change here is your paper size. So if you got 8.5 by 14, you would say that you got legal, right? Or tabloid, which is even bigger. I believe it's 11 by 17. So depending on the size, so you choose your paper size from here. And your layout, we're going to get into more of this a little bit later where we deal with headers and footers and that kind of thing. But those are all options that are available just within margins here. So you could simply change your margins by just using your arrow button here to go up or down. You can also tab from one to another, so you can go one and then tab one, tab one, tab one, and then you'll be able to say OK, and it affects the whole document. So that's done. You can also, from that same menu, from layout here, by default your document is aligned top, so everything is from the top down. But if you wanted everything to be centered, like in a poster, I see this a lot, you can actually have your Word document centered so that when you start typing, it starts right in the middle and it spreads. You can also justify the same way you do text. So instead of left to right, it would spread it out top to bottom, again, making it look like you're using more of your page. So not very popular, but very useful features. So I'm going to get out of page setup, out of margins here, and I'm going to bring you to the next option, which is columns. Now, I don't really like these predetermined settings because they do your entire document. So if I hit 3, everything's 3, right? If I hit 1, everything's 1. Instead, what I like to do is put my insertion point where I want to change. So I want my first title to stay in 1 column, but let's say I want everything else to be in 2. I put my insertion point here, and then I would go to more columns, and then I would choose 2. And here's the important part. You need to specify it from this point forward. In other words, leave the top alone, right? But just affect the rest. And then you would say, okay. So now this is still in 1 big column, and everything else is in 2. Very useful. Now, if you don't like where your columns are breaking, I can send this to the next column very easily. It's called a column break. 2 ways of doing this. I can go to breaks here. So we're still in page layout. I can go to breaks and say, go to the next column right now. So that's a column break. And with my show hide on, right now I've got this on, which you should always have on, by the way. It's your legend. It tells you what's going on in your document. And it's telling me that there's a column break here. And that's why this was shot up to there. That looks a lot better. It's more balanced. All right. And the other thing you can do is when you get, let's say here, if I want the rest of this to be back to 1 column, I would go back to page layout, columns. I wouldn't do 1 because that's going to do my whole document. I got to go back here, 1, and once again ask for this point forward. And now from this point forward, I'm back to 1 column. So I went from 1 with the title to 2. Going to 2 columns actually will oftentimes save you space on your page, especially if you have short sentences, All right, so I use 2 columns often just to save paper. All right, so now I've got this document here. So I've gone from 1 to 2, back to 1. The other thing is I'm going to undo once here. When you want to send something to the next page, enter, enter, enter is not the right way to do it. What you want is you want a page break. Okay, so I showed you how to do a column break, and page break is essentially the same, only you're asking for a page break. And this means go to the next page right now. When you're done a chapter, right, in a book or in an essay, and you want to go to the next page, that's what you want. You want to go to the next page now. So now that I've gone to the next page, neatly and easily, I can now, once again, ask for this to go to 1 column from this point forward. So when I'm working in columns, I really like the this point forward feature. I use it all the time. Shortcuts, for those of you who love shortcuts, another way of inserting a page break is Control Enter. And if you want a column break, Control Shift Enter will give you a column break. Now I want to talk about sections. Now, a section will allow you, so I'm going to undo the columns things because I don't want to confuse my lessons here. So I'm just hitting undo, going back to a normal document. A section break allows you to do a few things. It allows you to turn your page from portrait to landscape if you wanted to, sideways. It allows you to change the headers or footers. If you grab a book, any book, when they go from chapter 1 to chapter 2, it usually tells you somewhere in the top or the bottom of the page. Those are headers and footers. And if you want to be able to change what the headers and footers say, you need a new section. So those are the 2 main reasons why you would want a section break. Section break is created by simply going to where you want a section break, putting your insertion point, and asking for one. So let's say that I wanted this to go to the next page, and I wanted it to be a new section. I would come here, so I put my insertion point in front of the T. I would come here and I would say, give me a next page section break. In other words, give me a new page and a new section. So now, the first page is one section, and this page is another section. Now, if I wanted to, rather than use this, I'm going to go back to margins and custom margins, and I'm going to go to landscape, and I'm going to say this section only. So I want this section to be landscape, so leave the top section alone. So the top section is still portrait, but the remaining is going to be landscape. Now, if I wanted to go back to portrait after this page, again, I need another section. So I need a next page section break. And now here, because I'm on this page now, I can now go to margins, custom margins, and I can ask to go portrait, this section. So I've gone from one to another. I would do the same thing with my headers and footers if I had headers and footers. So I'd be able to have a different header or footer or both in this section, and this section. So right now I've got 3 different sections in this document, and you can just keep going that way. So that's how to put in a section break, and that's what they do. Line numbers, not something you use very often. However, I see it a lot when people take minutes of a meeting. They often like to use this feature. Once again, I'm going to bring this document back to somewhat normal. I'm going to show you this feature. It's line numbers. So it's again page layout, line numbers, and you can ask for continuous line numbers, and it simply counts all of your lines, whether they have anything in them or not. See, this is a blank paragraph here; it doesn't have anything, but it's counting your lines. And you can set it up a couple different ways. I'm going to go back to page layout here, line numbers. You can restart each page, so every time you have a new page, it starts over again. Can't think of too many instances where you would use that, but that's how you use it. Another thing you need to know, I'm going to undo once again to bring this back to normal, is you can turn on hyphenation, which allows you to, when your document will use up as much of the area within your page margins as possible by automatically hyphenating words so that it'll, let's say drawing didn't fit on this line completely, or selection didn't. Selection's probably closer. Part of selection might have fit here, but the whole thing didn't fit, so it wrapped, it automatically went to the next line. You want to save yourself some space, you can turn on your hyphenation, it's called. So you would come here and say, just give me automatic hyphenation for the entire document. So now it hyphenated. See, dimension here has been hyphenated. Attention has been hyphenated. All right. So again, if you're looking to save yourself some space, that would work. Your other options in hyphenation are of course, none. And then manual. And now it's going to ask you one at a time through your entire document which ones you want hyphenated and which ones you do not. So that's your hyphenating feature. The next thing you need to know along the same line is sometimes you have two words that you really wanted to stick together. A really good example of that is first name, last name. So if you had a person, let's say interior was a person's first name and designer was the person's last name. All right, let's just pretend here. And you wanted them to stay together, because it looks kind of silly when they go from one line to another. You can, instead of a regular space, I'm just going to hit backspace here to put these together. You would put what's called a non-breaking space. And the non-breaking space, I'm going to give you the shortcut version, is Control-Shift-Space. So now these two words, you see your non-printing character here? Your non-printing character for a regular space is just a dot. But here, it's this little symbol, and it means these two words have been glued together with a non-breaking space. So it was Control-Shift-Spacebar. If you don't remember shortcuts, I don't know that this is any easier, but you go to Insert, Symbol, More Symbols, and Special Characters. So you can ask for a non-breaking space. Okay. So these special characters, a non-breaking hyphen would be really good too, because if you have a phone number that starts on one line and is going to another line, a bit of a it doesn't look professional. So if you want a non-breaking hyphen, you can come here to get a non-breaking hyphen as well. Right, so I just inserted that. So now, and it didn't work at all. Isn't it awesome when it doesn't work for the teacher? Oh, it gave me an enter as well. So I'm going to get rid of the enter, and now I have the space, and there's my non-breaking space. Okay, so that's non-breaking space to keep two words together. One last note on columns. Once again, if you're working in a document and you want to change how many columns you have, the best, smartest thing to do is to go where it is you want to begin, and then go to page layout, and don't choose any of these, because it'll change everything in your document, right? What you need to do is ask how many you want, and then ask for this point forward. Now, by default, it's going to make all the widths the exact same thing and the spacing the exact same thing, right? Which is usually what you want. Now here, this looks terrible. You'd want to even these out a little bit. So what you'd probably want is a column break here. So you'd ask for this to go to the next column, and then you'd want to do the same thing here. And now you've got something a little bit more balanced. And of course, I would want to remove the indentation here because it just looks ridiculous. There we go. You have something a little bit more balanced. Now, it's important that you know that you can affect the spacing and the widths here, right? So if you didn't want equal, if you wanted to change them, if you wanted to add or decrease some spacing, you can do that, all right? So you can manipulate this quite a bit if you wanted to. And the only problem with doing that, of course, is you just don't know what you're going to get as far as the result is concerned. So I just manipulated some of the things. So need you to know that you can do that. The other thing I want you to know is you can go back to columns here, and simple little feature is the fact that you can ask for a line in between your columns, which gives it a neat little look as well.